October 10, 1975. In a small house in Los Angeles, an elderly man suffered a heart attack. Orson Welles. At 25, he made Citizen Kane, the greatest film of all time. But at 70, he died alone, in a house full of unfinished projects. Because Orson Welles was the greatest genius Hollywood ever saw. But Hollywood never forgave him. Because he was too young, too talented, too independent. And Hollywood loves none of those things. So Orson Welles' career peaked at 25, and the next 45 years were a slow descent. Before we reveal how Hollywood destroyed the greatest filmmaker who ever lived, hit subscribe for more shocking untold stories about geniuses Hollywood couldn't handle. Orson Welles was born in 1915 in Wisconsin. He was a child prodigy, truly. At 3, he read Shakespeare. At 7, he performed in theater. At 10, he wrote his own plays. His mother was a musician, his father an inventor. Orson inherited talent from both. But at 9, his mother died. At 15, his father died. Orson was orphaned. But not alone, because he had talent. At 16, he went to Ireland. He performed at the Gate Theatre. He introduced himself as a Broadway star. He lied, but they accepted him. Because he was so talented, nobody asked his age. In the late 1930s, he returned to New York. He founded the Mercury Theatre with John Houseman. In 1938, he caused an incident on radio. He broadcast The War of the Worlds. He presented a Martian invasion of Earth as breaking news. Millions believed it. Panic erupted. Orson became famous overnight. He was 23 years old. Hollywood immediately called him. RKO Studios made an offer. Make whatever you want. Complete control is yours. No director had ever been given such an offer, especially not a 24-year-old. But Orson accepted, because he was already a genius, and he knew it.
In 1940, he started shooting Citizen Kane, his first film. He was 25 years old. He controlled everything: script, direction, acting, editing. The film was the story of newspaper magnate Charles Foster Kane. Power, loneliness, decline. But everyone knew Kane was actually William Randolph Hearst, the real newspaper magnate. Hearst got angry. "Stop that film," he said. He pressured RKO, he banned advertisements, he blocked screenings. The film was nearly destroyed, but Orson resisted. Citizen Kane was released in 1941. Critics went wild. A masterpiece, they said. But because of Hearst's pressure, it flopped at the box office. The film lost money. Oscar night came. Citizen Kane was nominated in 9 categories. Orson thought he'd win, because the film was perfect. But Hollywood punished him. He won only 1 Oscar. Best Screenplay. Directing, picture, acting, none of them. Because Hollywood hated Orson. He was too young, too arrogant, too independent. "That boy is too big for his britches," they said. "We need to teach him a lesson." And they did. His next film was The Magnificent Ambersons, 1942. Orson shot the film but couldn't finish the edit. He was called away to another project. RKO saw their chance. They took the film from him. They recut it. They removed 15 minutes. Orson's version was never shown. It was lost. Orson was devastated. "My film has been destroyed," he said. The rest of the 1940s was a nightmare. RKO no longer trusted Orson. They interfered with every project. Journey into Fear, The Stranger, all were ruined. Orson had no control. In 1947, he made The Lady from Shanghai. Rita Hayworth starred. She was his wife at the time. The film was a noir masterpiece, but the studio didn't like it. They recut it, they mutilated it. Orson and Rita divorced. The film failed.
Hollywood closed its doors to Orson. Unreliable, they said. Expensive, uncontrollable. Orson was only 33 years old, and his career was over. In 1948, he went to Europe because he couldn't find work in America. He made films in Europe. Othello, Mr. Arkadin, The Trial, all were low budget. Orson used his own money. He earned money by acting, then invested it in his own films. But he never had complete control. There was always a money problem. In 1958, he returned to America.
He made Touch of Evil, a film noir masterpiece. But the studio interfered again. They cut Orson's version. They changed it. Orson was devastated again. "They never let me make my film," he said. In the 1960s and 70s, Orson struggled to survive. He appeared in commercials. He was a guest on TV shows. He appeared on talk shows.
He made Paul Masson wine commercials. "We will sell no wine before its time," he said. A genius was selling wine. Because nobody would let him make films, he started projects but couldn't finish them. The Other Side of the Wind, Don Quixote. Filming would stop before money ran out. Orson lived with his unfinished projects for years. In 1975, he received an award, AFI Lifetime Achievement Award. When he took the stage, he cried, because Hollywood was finally appreciating him. But it was too late. Orson was 60 years old. His best years were behind him. In the 1980s, Orson was obese. He had health problems, but he was still working. He recorded audiobooks, he gave interviews, he developed projects. He tried to finish The Other Side of the Wind, but there was no money. On the morning of October 10, 1985, Orson was sitting at his typewriter. He was writing a script. He had a heart attack. He fell to the floor.
He was found hours later. He was 70 years old. His funeral was small. A few friends. Not many from Hollywood came. His body was cremated. His ashes were scattered at a friend's ranch in Spain. Because Orson didn't want to be buried in America. He didn't want to be buried in Hollywood. After his death, people rewatched Citizen Kane, and they understood Orson Welles was right. That film really was a masterpiece. In the 1990s, The Other Side of the Wind was found. It was completed years later. In 2018, it was released on Netflix. 33 years too late. Critics wrote, Orson Welles should have been given another chance. But it was too late. Orson had died 33 years earlier. The tragedy deepened when people examined what had been lost. All those unfinished projects, all that wasted genius. Directors who came after Orson studied his work. Scorsese, Coppola, Spielberg. They all acknowledged their debt to him.
"Everything I know about filmmaking I learned from Citizen Kane," Spielberg said. But while these directors became rich and successful, Orson died broke and forgotten. The final years were particularly cruel. Orson was reduced to appearing on talk shows, telling stories about his glory days. Johnny Carson would have him on, David Letterman, and Orson would charm the audience with tales of old Hollywood. But after the cameras stopped, he'd return to his small house, to his typewriter, to his unfinished scripts. Friends who visited described the man still burning with ideas, still planning films, still believing somehow that Hollywood would give him another chance. But that chance never came. Peter Bogdanovich, who became close to Orson in those final years, later said, "Every studio in Hollywood should be ashamed. They had the greatest filmmaker in history living among them, and they let him beg for work." The weight gain was partly from depression. Orson ate to fill the void. The void left by all those unmade films, all that wasted potential. He'd joke about it on TV, make fun of himself, but friends saw through it. He was dying inside, one friend said. Every day he wasn't making films, a part of him died. Orson tried everything to get financing. He pitched to studios, he wrote proposals, he even tried to raise money from private investors, but nobody wanted to take the risk. The boy genius, who'd made the greatest film at 25, couldn't get a meeting at 65. The irony wasn't lost on Orson. "I peaked too early," he said once. In Hollywood, that's a death sentence. His final project, the one he was writing when he died, was never completed. The pages sat on his desk, unfinished. Friends gathered them after his death. They read his notes, his plans, his vision. "It would have been brilliant," one said. Like everything else he never got to make. The tributes after his death were bittersweet. Hollywood praised him, called him a genius, said he was ahead of his time. But where were they when he was alive? When he was begging for funding? When he was doing wine commercials just to survive?
They were closing doors, saying no, punishing him for being too talented, too young, too independent at 25. Orson Welles made the greatest film of all time at 25, but Hollywood never forgave him because he was too young, too talented, too independent. Hollywood wants control, and Orson couldn't be controlled, so he spent the rest of his career on unfinished projects. He died at 70, alone, writing a script. Because Orson Welles never stopped, he never gave up, but Hollywood never gave him a second chance. Sometimes the greatest geniuses are too far ahead of their time, and Orson Welles was 60 years ahead.
Hollywood couldn't keep up, so they destroyed him. But his films will live forever, because genius never dies. Hollywood only tries to kill it. The lesson of Orson Welles isn't about talent. It's about timing. It's about playing the game. It's about not threatening the system. Orson did all three things wrong. He had too much talent too early. He refused to play by the rules, and he threatened everyone with his independence. So Hollywood made an example of him. They showed every young filmmaker what happens when you don't bend, when you don't compromise, when you insist on your vision. You make one masterpiece, and then you spend 45 years being punished for it. That's the price of genius in Hollywood, and Orson Welles paid it in full.